I'm here today to recommend that you cut your positions in Daniel Industries, the leading brokerage firm. It's a function of two factors. Firstly, a rise in Brazilian corporate tax rates, a leading market for the firm. And secondly, a drop in volatility, a surprising drop in both the metals and energy markets.
New government legislation will soon abolish ground rents paid by tens of thousands of leaseholders, and those who own the ground rent portfolios stand to lose millions. We recommend taking out spread bets, going short the stocks of Consolidated Mutual and Abacus Life. That's the constituents whose shares we expect to see pummeled.
Now, you might have been able to spot the difference there. The second one was the deepfake. But 6 months from now, you might not be able to tell the difference quite so easily. Deepfake technology has only been easily available since last year. And as generative AI advances, it's set to improve rapidly. You can already buy scamming software for $20 on the dark web. This new speed of change will challenge banks' efforts to stay ahead.
There are three main risks for deepfake technology when it comes to the banks. First is the fraud risk. You have a fraud loss potential when you're talking about the fraud liability shift, especially here in the UK, that you have to compensate victims even if they are scammed and do the transaction themselves. The second is the compliance side of things. You have the know your customer duty of care, that you have to make sure that the person you're dealing with is a real person, that they have valid documentation, and that they have some sort of liveness check, so you make sure that it's somebody real that you're dealing with. And the final is the brand and reputation risk, because you're faced with potentially losing the trust of the public, that you're not able to protect their funds, and it does cause brand damage.
We know for a fact that large financial institutions are using voice, video, audio to double check various forms of authentication. Therefore, with these LLM models, they can be potentially faked. People can mimic my voice, people can mimic my picture, and increasingly they may be able to mimic movement. So all of those forms of authentication are now subject to a deepfake.
Deepfakes can now be used to attack any process where you need to know who you're dealing with. Perhaps the most common of these in terms of the creation of entirely synthetic accounts. So whilst we've all seen videos of famous people made into deepfakes, the most common way in which deepfakes are currently used is actually to create imagery of people that don't exist at all. So what this enables a criminal organisation to do is to create potentially very large numbers of entirely synthetic accounts that they control. And this enables them to do all kinds of things, for example, for money laundering purposes. However, this is not the only threat that banks need to be concerned about. There are other areas in which the deepfakes can be used. As an example, you might have attackers who will create deepfakes to make out that they are an employee of the bank and scam a customer. You might also have, and we have seen cases of this recently, where that you have things like deepfakes which are used in part of a social engineering attack to convince an employee of a bank to transfer large sums of money. And this can occur because of this change in deepfakes now that they are impossible to spot by eye.
Well, there is technology now available to try to stop some of these attacks, but in general, I think in this cat and mouse game of who's ahead, I'm afraid that the criminal element might be ahead right now. Their ability to leverage this emerging technology to capture information and then fake, get video, audio, other forms of identification is pretty strong. So I think for now, the advantage may be to the bad guys, and that presents real risk until we catch up with some of our means of detection.
So the risk to banks is increased loss of revenue. So globally, fraud costs the economy about $6 trillion a year. And when we think about the fact that this type of fraud we're looking at with deepfakes is only going to become harder to detect and more accessible and easier to perpetrate, that figure is just going to increase exponentially.
Anytime there's an incident using deepfake technology for fraud purposes, we need to be able to share that information with each other, because anytime there's an incident against one firm, it can be the lessons learned for the rest of the sector, so they can enable a mutual defense strategy to tackle these rising cases.
We feel the best way to counter the threat from deepfakes is through biometrics, and biometrics backed up with something called liveness, which is the way that you determine that you're dealing with a real person who's in front of the camera at this moment in time.